The Gold War is nothing else than a third world war. It is not only a most unnecessary, but the most destructive of all wars. Saturday, July 29th, 2023, Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. We're going to do a book review, and the book we're going to look at has probably had the biggest influence on my view of the current monetary system, on my view of gold and history, and how important gold is, not just for trying to preserve your savings, but also how gold is important for a free and prosperous and fair society, really. And the book is Gold Wars by Ferdinand Lips. The battle against sound money as seen from a Swiss perspective. And it's interesting because I went into Amazon to find whether they sell the book, and they do. There are used ones and new copies. It's not that easy to find. But funnily enough, Amazon says here, you last purchased this item on October 7th, 2002, not 2022. So over 20 years ago, I first bought this book, and it's had a pretty big impact on the way I think about things. And it's one of the reasons why I've kept going, why I do my videos as well. And I think it's a good way to look at the bigger picture, especially with what happened this week in the short term, the noise in the paper market, which frustrates many of us. But this gives a different perspective of how important gold is and how we need to keep educating people about it. And this is what Ferdinand Lips did. So what I'm going to do, of course, I'm not going to read the whole book. I'm going to go through what people were saying at the time that this book was published about this book. And it was published in 2001. So that's what I'll do first, and I'm going to go through some of the passages in the book. And he's got a conclusion to the book as well, Ferdinand Lips. So here's what Dr. Apt, he's a professor, or was a professor at the time, at the Federal Institute of Technology in Zurich, Switzerland. It is the great merit of this provocative book by Ferdinand Lips to bring back a wider understanding of why gold was a solid base for economic stability in many societies. As our overextended global economy is heading for more troublesome times, the global village will need an unquestionable economic basis again, and does not bear the stamp of any particular country. Today, as Lips shows in this book, the conceivable entity for that is gold. Gold is best suited to supply confidence to a troubled economy and anchor it in reality again. Since antiquity, gold has been a symbol of the highest value to humans. Gold, the sun-like shining yellow metal that has the quality of being incorruptible. It is an adequate metaphor for that inner kernel in humans about which we need to become conscious during our lifetime. This aspect of gold has always fascinated and inspired us. All of a sudden, the wish to own a solid base of this yellow metal may again become the desire of individuals and nations, as it has happened so many times before. Interesting about the BRICS, right? I know there's a lot of people in denial, and I'm not saying they're going to create a gold-backed currency right away in August. There is a possibility, but it's not the important thing, in my opinion. But let's just finish off with what Dr. Apt said. Then we may find ourselves, to our surprise, on the way back to a solid gold standard. let's go through what Elizabeth Currier, president of the Committee for Monetary Research and Education, said about the book. In Gold Wars, Ferdinand Lips takes on what is probably the most talked about and least understood subject of the times, money. He is to be admired as he has performed an important task to provide understanding of this vital subject, moving through history to recent developments to his own experiences as a Swiss banker. It is his long career in banking that lends vitality and clarity to this text. He maintains a sharp focus by his use of extensive quotations from writers and bankers, many of them whom were his friends, men who tried to show the way for sound money and banking and the folly of the decisions that were being made. In contrast, he includes the words of other financial and political leaders, those who instituted the monetary policies that have led to the serious monetary problems the world now faces. The earnestness of his endeavor is clear as he concludes, and this is what Ferdinand Lips said, the Gold War, is nothing else than a third world war. It is not only a most unnecessary, but the most destructive of all wars. It should be stopped now. Indeed, this is a different kind of war story, fascinating and ongoing. Gold Wars is valuable reading. And just one more comment here about what people were saying about this book. And it's by Dr. Lawrence Parks, PhD, Executive Director of the Foundation for the Advancement of Monetary Education. And it's interesting because back in the early 2000s, I was still working in the city, and I used to go to New York on business every other year or so. And one year I met Dr. Parks after reading this book, which was actually published by the Foundation of Advancement of Monetary Education, as you can see here, FAME. I met him for a coffee in New York. He was a very nice man. And I think they still have a website. You can go to their blog, fame.org. So this is what he says. Gold Wars is an absolute must-read for anyone who is concerned about his financial future. It is appropriate that Ferdinand Lips, a former Rothschild executive and a private banker in Switzerland who has spent 50 years dealing with money, to confirm that the world's monetary system has been rigged to plunder the savings of ordinary people worldwide for the benefit of a small financial elite. So yes, he did work for the Rothschild Bank in Switzerland. It says here about Ferdinand Lips. So he passed away in 2005. He was born in Switzerland in 1931. And his roots are in banking, where he started his career and became a co-founder and a managing director of Rothschild Bank AG in Zurich. In 1987, he opened his own bank, Bank Lips AG, also in Zurich. He retired in 1998 when he sold his equity interest in the bank. So that's a little bit of background on Ferdinand Lips. And I've noted some passages here that are quite interesting. One is his friendship with John Exter, who we've spoken about a lot, and the John Exter inverted pyramid. He acknowledges here on page 11, he says, John Exter, former central banker at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York and banker at the First National City Bank. In his earlier days as chief of the Far Eastern section of the Federal Reserve, he served as an advisor to the secretaries of finance of both the Philippines and Ceylon, or Sri Lanka. In 1950, he became the first governor of the newly organized central bank of Ceylon, Sri Lanka today. He shared his first-hand experience with the economic situation of the 1930s with me, and I learned a lot about the destructive impact of debt from him. He created the economic model of the inverted pyramid, in which gold is the supreme form of liquidity. So I thought that was interesting. Another passage here that I thought was interesting is in the introduction. He says, "This book is much more than a chronicle of gold wars. It is also an account of the historic failure of Esperanto money." He calls it Esperanto money. Over 100 years ago, a Polish physician by the name of Ludwik Lazarus Zamenhof created a synthetic language in the hope of removing the curse of Babel from mankind. According to the Bible, man had become so conceited as to challenge God by proposing to build a tower that was to reach to high heaven. God's punishment for the temerity was to confuse the tongues of nations. The tower could never be completed for failure of communication due to the confusion of different languages. Zamenhof called his new language Esperanto, meaning the hopeful. However, the hope was in vain, as other synthetic languages such as Edo sprang up. The confusion of tongues and the curse of Babel has remained. Calling irredeemable currency Esperanto money is apt. The biblical story may be interpreted allegorically as an admonition not to challenge God by attempting to build a tower of irredeemable debt that is to reach to high heaven. But the admonition fell upon deaf ears. Now God's wrath is upon us. Currencies of nations have been confused. The tower can never be completed for a lack of compatibility of means of payment. The hope of Esperanto money to remove the curse of Babel is in vain. Other synthetic currencies spring up, such as the SDR, the euro, and so on. The confusion of currencies and the curse of Babel remains. Ownership of gold is not about lust. It is about liberty of the individual. The gold standard is not a game. It is the embodiment of the timeless principle, pacta sunt servanda. Promises are made to be kept. Official hatred of gold bordering on the neurotic appears less irrational if we contemplate that gold and gold alone is capable of exposing the ever-present bad faith behind the promises of the powers that be. I'm going to stop here in the introduction because I've got more to cover that I think is interesting. And the title of the book, of course, is Gold Wars, but it is the battle against sound money as seen from a Swiss perspective. And it's interesting that he goes on a lot about what was going on in the late 90s, early 2000s, and how Switzerland basically sold off its financial independence, sold off half its gold reserves, and he thinks this was a big mistake, that eventually Swiss banking would be brought to its knees. And he was right, because this is what he says here about SMB gold sales could be the financial Marignano for big Swiss banks and the Swiss economy. Marignano apparently was a battle that the Swiss mercenaries fought back in the Middle Ages that they lost. So it's more to do with Swiss history. But he says here, a similar condition prevails today. The Swiss banks are active in every part of the world and therefore exposed to increased risk and vulnerable to blackmail by jealous competitors. The Swiss were successful in the past, but they probably grew too big. There used to be 3 big banks, and now there are only 2. Two of the big 3 merged for no apparent reason. Cash-rich UBS formed a very successful AAA bank, was taken over by smaller Swiss bank corporation in need of cash. Size is not everything. Banks do not necessarily have to be big. They must be solid, offer good services to their clients, and be profitable for their shareholders. That's all. Switzerland's unique gold reserve gave the currency and consequently the banking industry the necessary respect it needed to build the confidence in its international clientele. With half of this treasure dissipated, part of this respect will have evaporated. Switzerland's role in international banking will not be the same. So there you go. He was very prescient about what was going to happen in Swiss banking, and unfortunately, that he was right. So let's skip to the conclusions by Ferdinand Lips. So this is on page 249. It says conclusions by a former private banker, security analyst, director of gold mining companies, monetary historian, Swiss patriot, and worried citizen of the world. So this is not just trying to warn the Swiss, which he tried, of course, but also the whole world. And this book is really interesting because it goes through the history. It talks about John Law. It talks about the assignats. It talks about ancient Rome, the Greeks, and the importance of gold, right? So it's not just about the Swiss banking system. So let's go through the conclusion. The Gold War is nothing else than a third World War. It is not only a most unnecessary, but the most destructive of all wars. It should be stopped now. World War III may have begun with the demise of the classic gold standard of the 19th century. If the countries at war in World War I had not hastily and foolishly given up the gold standard, World War I might not have lasted more than 6 months, because the warring nations would have run out of gold to pay for it, and war taxes would have been resisted. I contend that World War I lasted as long as it did because the gold standard was abandoned. Deficit financing made it possible for it to last over 4 years, destroying capital, wealth, a rich cultural heritage, and unnecessarily killing millions of young soldiers and innocent people. If World War I had lasted only 6 months, currencies would not have been destroyed. There would have been no Versailles Treaty and no German hyperinflation. The little understood Genoa Convention of 1922 was largely responsible for the boom of the 1920s and the crash of 1929, leading to the crisis of the 1930s. Without the mishandling of gold, there would have never been a Hitler. Neither would there have been a Bolshevik takeover by the likes of a Lenin, nor would Russia have had to endure a Stalin with even more millions of innocents killed. There would never have been a World War II. Ignoring gold led to the 1944 Bretton Woods system and also to its downfall. Without repeating the mistakes of 1914 or 1922, we never would have had an inflationary crisis in the 1970s. The oil crisis in the 70s and the approaching oil and energy crisis of the 21st century are primarily monetary crises. The suppression of gold and the unlimited expansion of fiat money